Tonight on Panorama. With homelessness on the rise, growing numbers of people are being housed in converted office blocks.
Seen them hanging out the front.
There's been a lot of
drugs? You want drugs? You want drugs? Yeah. No, mate.
Owned by private companies, rooms are rented out, not just by councils.
You'd have ex-offenders, charities, housing tenants there just come out of prison.
We go undercover to investigate the reality of life in one office block conversion.
A lot of them would do, a lot of them dealing for now. So you can't, control 172 flats.
Do not take probationers, do not do it, but 10 flats of money to them.
Yeah.
And meet vulnerable residents, pushed to breaking point.
I was under the impression I'll be with mums and kids, and then I'm with drug addicts. There's people that have literally had fights outside the front door, so I'm like, how am I meant to feel safe? People knocking your door at 3 in the morning, bang, bang, bang.
We had a violent drug dealer living next door to us.
Children found knives.
Used needles.
I'm here with a child. People smoking drugs in front of us.
This is human warehousing.
These are the voices of people who've lived in temporary accommodation.
When I first moved in, I thought it feels a little bit like a hotel, but then it felt like a prison, yeah. All they needed to do was put a bit of gym equipment out there and it felt like you was in a prison yard, you see on the film. Basically, it turned into hell.
Living hell.
Living hell, yeah.
Matt and Tanya are from Harlow in Essex. Matt was made redundant in 2014.
I had my own 4-bedroom house and nice car, and I lost my job. It just tumbled out of control, mate, at the end of the day.
They were quickly overwhelmed by debt and lost their home.
But for me personally, it destroyed me, mate. It destroyed me. It was a world that I've never been used to.
Just felt embarrassed, didn't we?
Yeah, I felt embarrassed, felt a failure as a parent, as a father.
In this country, just over 250,000 people are homeless. That includes 130,000 children. With their young daughter, they were moved into temporary accommodation.
It was not for wanting to try, and we tried our best, but it didn't work out, so we had to approach the local authority for help. And that's when our sort of journey began. So.
We're in the middle of a housing crisis, with growing numbers of people now homeless.
We have got hundreds of thousands of people in this country who are one paycheck away from being made homeless. We've got soaring house prices, soaring costs of rent, we've got people on low incomes, housing benefit is not meeting that gap, and we're talking about people in work, we're talking about families with children. Anyone can find themselves homeless.
Local authorities have a legal duty to help house their homeless. That housing has to be safe and in a reasonable condition, but there aren't enough council-owned properties for everyone who needs them. And that can be expensive. Last year, councils in England spent £1.1 billion on private, temporary accommodation. In the past, hotels and bedsits have been used until permanent homes could be found, but they've been criticised. So councils are increasingly reliant on other private landlords.
Anyone who's rich enough can buy and convert an office block. There are no rules on the size rooms should be, and they don't even have to have windows. This is thanks to permitted development rights, introduced in 2013 to address the lack of housing. Developers don't need planning permission. Hailed as a bold new business model, 54,000 offices have already been converted across the country. In Harlow, they have the highest proportion of office block to housing conversions than anywhere else in England.
In all, 12 former office blocks have been converted in Harlow, creating nearly 1,100 rooms. The housing charity Shelter has campaigned against them.
The permitted development rights basically means that people can get around planning permission rules and convert, for example, office blocks into temporary accommodation for large amounts of people, putting them in tiny little units. It's totally inappropriate, and it's allowing even more public money to be poured into the pockets of individuals who are making profit off the back of people's suffering.
These buildings look unremarkable. In the past, they were used by insurance companies and the National Crime Agency. But 4 years ago, they were bought by the private property developer, Caradon, and converted into large-scale temporary housing. The company's founder, Mario Carozzo, explains their business model.
Why don't many developers do what we do? Very simple, because it's not cost effective, it's very, very challenging. Most developers want to buy, build and sell. That's not what we're about. Our ethos is about creating quality homes.
Caradon are one of a number of private companies operating in this growing market. They say they are a successful and multi-award-winning business who've helped house thousands of people who'd have otherwise struggled to secure accommodation. In the last 4 years, they've received at least £11 million from local authorities to help house people from across the south of England.
It's very sustainable what we do too, so we're not digging up ground because these are existing buildings.
And Caradon is growing. By the end of this year, they say they hope to have 5,000 homes available. This one is Templefields House. Caradon paid more than £6 million for this former office building on an industrial estate. Now it's home to up to 400 people, some of them sent here by councils across southeast England. There are no transport links nearby, and it's a 40-minute walk to Harlow town centre. I wanted to know more about what it's like to live in a place like this, and one resident invited me to see his room.
Come in, by all means.
Thank you.
It's not much, but there we go.
Nick lives here with his wife, Lynn.
Where's your wife?
She's at hospital. She's got internal renal failure. She's at dialysis this evening.
All right. So she stays in here with you?
Yes, yes. This is her space. That's my space. One makes the best of whatever, but this is a shelter, it's not a home.
The reduced function of her liver and kidneys leave her vulnerable to a septic infection.
Kitchen and toilet and shower is in the same places. Inconvenient for my other half.
She's terminally ill?
Yes, and she's on dialysis, so she's got 2 holes in her currently, in the stomach and directly into her heart. And infection is the major killer for things like this. So
I just find it incredible you're living here with your partner who's dying.
yes,
And you've been here for almost 3 years.
yes,
What's temporary about being here for 3 years?
nothing.
Caradon say their aim is to provide a stepping stone to permanent accommodation.
They're providing a simple service. They're not social workers. They go, here's a house, do you want it? Yes or no?
But Nick says the stress of life here is sometimes difficult to bear, and it's especially hard for his wife.
Is it dangerous for some people to live here?
There's a million different stories here. But a lot of them can just snap at the smallest thing. Some guy tried to pick a physical fight with her 2 months ago. She was standing in the lobby on the stairs trying to answer a phone to get a taxi. And she was in some chap's way, and he snaps at her and launches a verbal and physical attack. She's not happy to go outside by herself.
Matt and Tanya are amongst the first families to move in.
It was nice at first. I think there was about 5 people moved in, and then the next week 5 or 10 would move in, and so on and so on.
Residents of Harlow, they were placed in Temple Fields by the local council. Their neighbours were from all backgrounds. Some were difficult and dangerous.
Our neighbours were from Harlow Council, from various other councils, London councils, other Essex councils. The building was used by various organisations, so you'd have sort of ex-offenders, charities, housing, tenants there just come out of prison, probation service, social services. Yeah.
So then once it was completely full, it was horrific, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
horrific, incredibly hard. It was awful.
Carradine had security on site, and when Matt discovered they needed a new guard at Temple Fields, he put himself forward.
It was far too much for the small amount of staff team that were there to cope with. I struggled.
Why was it hard for staff to cope?
You'd get faced with someone who'd lost their child, you'd get people drunk, you'd get people that are aggressive, you'd get violent people, anything you can think of, you'd get faced.
Matt took his complaints to Carradine's head office.
Did you ever go to Carradine?
I used to make complaints about it, but nothing was ever got back.
And he wasn't the only one to complain. Panorama has been told that crime and drugs are out of control at Temple Fields. Since this place opened 3 years ago, the police have been called out nearly 600 times. CCTV cameras monitor 24 hours a day.
The police would be there daily. Sometimes it'd be once a day, 2 times, 3 times, various days over the week.
Eventually, Matt had enough and handed in his notice. Panorama decided to send in an undercover reporter to investigate, and like Matt, he got a job as a security guard.
Oh right, okay, so both today.
On his first day, he's given a briefing on the residents.
A few of them on here, we've got ex-prisoners, we've got families, we've got drug addicts, we've got it on here.
Yeah.
He's told how to keep himself safe.
We've got stab vests, right? I say to you that you wear them, just for now, to build up rapport people. Look here, this is the farm.
And he's directed to patrol the corridors and guard the perimeter of the property.
Yeah. If anyone jumps over the fence, you see it, just go outside and question them.
Back inside, he's told to record any incidents.
I'll show you, our standard log should just be, it'll be mostly patrols that you do.
Yeah.
They come out, you'll see it.
And he's shown an old CCTV clip with an intruder to watch out for.
This is an old video, by the way.
Oh right,
That's
okay.
what I used to deal with on a daily basis with him.
Yeah.
And you see a rubby stomach where he ejects himself and stuff.
Oh, bloody hell.
Our reporter is out on patrol.
They do a lot here as well. They put the scratches up.
Yeah.
Just push them down.
Yeah.
The corridors are narrow and claustrophobic, and the smell of cannabis is overwhelming.
It's not as bad as the other. You can already smell it, innit? So when you come up against that, do you just report it and leave it, or
I know it is already.
You just give them a knock?
Don't leave massive reports.
Okay, yeah.
A resident complains of a banging noise outside their room. Someone is breaking the fire door.
You're constantly on edge. There was people that were quite angry. There's people that have literally had fights. Outside the front door, you hear them screaming, kicking and all of this. That place just has so many issues. You couldn't just pick one. There's so many issues.
Last year, Casey and her 3-year-old daughter were housed in Temple Fields for 8 months. When she moved in, she thought it would be a safe place for families.
I was under the impression I'll be with mums and kids, and then I'm with drug addicts, and I'm in flats with burglars, people that smoke crack, people that smoke weed, all under one roof. So I'm like, how am I meant to feel safe? I'm coming home and I don't want to come home. It really affected my parenting, my relationships with family, my relationships with a lot of people. Struggled with alcohol while I was there. Started taking antidepressants, and then I was taking tablets to make me go to sleep from when I was living there. Everyone I spoke to couldn't wait to get out.
It's just after 8 p.m, and our undercover reporter spots young children playing in the car park.
How old are you, darling?
She's 4 years old.
3 years old. Come on then, because there are cars here as well. We don't want you getting run over. Hey?
Not long after,
You alright there, mate?
he hears a car revving its engine near the front gate.
Take your foot off. You're going to take your foot off the accelerator. What?
The driver's foot is flat on the accelerator, but not in gear.
What are you doing here then? What are you doing here?
He's unresponsive,
Have you been drinking, are you?
and now slurring his words.
No. Oh, yeah.
The security manager comes out to assess the situation.
Hey, you alright? You gonna go back to your flat? I'll shut this for you, I'll let you, alright, you alright? He lives here, yeah. He lives here. Right.
But he doesn't call the police.
The only problem we have is when they're out here, is that the old Bill, my class him, because he's not actually on the property, so to speak.
Yeah.
They won't even touch him, so they won't even say to us, right.
Caradon say all incidents are logged when necessary. And when he got the job, our undercover reporter was told to record any incidents on the security log to notify management.
Do we put anything in the log?
Because it's just the thing you can't control.
Yeah.
Like, it's his licence at the end of the day.
Yeah.
All the ones who want to take his licence away.
Yeah.
You know, he's come back steaming drunk and he's not causing no. The only thing you can do if he does cause any trouble.
Yeah.
Like, he very rarely ever does, to be fair. I've never had one incident with him. But he's like that, he's bad.
When Matt and Tanya were living here, their daughter was just 4.
The things that she'd heard in there, the arguments, and that's something she's not used to. And
Yeah, there'd be self-harming openly within the building and outside the building.
Residents self-harming in the open.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, big time.
she was frightened in there. She was always frightened.
And it's not just children who were frightened. Panorama has discovered that amongst the many vulnerable people who've been placed here are at least 10 victims of domestic violence. I'm on my way to meet one of them. Before she went to Temple Fields, she was a victim of a particularly bad attack.
Big gatherings on the stairs.
And when she arrived, she was shocked by what she saw.
Girl and a fella have a big punch up. That was on the day I was moving in, outside the doors. And he kept coming back to start overnight, all through the night, different times. And I suffered really bad of anxiety. It was through the roof.
What were you anxious about?
That maybe I'd be injured again by someone and I might have another stroke. I just thought that I'd been through the worst with my domestic violence and I've gone right back in where it's all chaos. I'd ring my friends or family and just say, look, I've had enough, can't do this. If this carries on, I'm going to kill myself.
Caradon say they have a commitment to their tenants' well-being that sets them apart from other providers of temporary accommodation. Did they offer you any support?
No. No. I'm not asking for a mansion, but desperate people want a bed. I'm just asking for a safe home. And I wasn't put in a safe home.
Caradon have told Panorama they take a zero-tolerance approach to all criminal and antisocial activity. But the security staff told our undercover reporter that the drugs trade here is out of control.
And a lot of them are dead, a lot of them dealing for now, same as the other block.
Yeah.
You can't, control 172 flats.
And many residents we've spoken to say drugs are one of the biggest problems here.
I went to his house I think I went to borrow some bleach and he was like, oh, just step in. I actually saw him cooking it, which they're things that you see on the telly. You would never think you would see that in front of me. You're cooking this drugs.
There was people passed out on benches and you'd see drug deals going on in the car parks and in the building.
So what drugs are we talking about?
All sorts of drugs, Class A.
Yeah, we used to see needles on the floor.
There was needles on the floor.
There was needles on the floor.
Chucked
around. In bushes.
Yeah.
A number of times, our undercover reporter saw suspicious people walking onto the property, sometimes following residents through the front gates or using the fire doors to get in. Outside, a concerned resident wants help.
I keep seeing them hanging out the front. There's been a lot of do drugs. You want drugs? You want drugs? No, mate. You're not all druggies, mate.
During the investigation, there were a number of drug raids. One resident was arrested for dealing cannabis, another for dealing crack cocaine and heroin. On his first day in the job, our undercover reporter was told that he might sometimes need to access residents' rooms in case of an emergency. Caradon say their staff only use master keys to enter rooms without permission if they're asked to by the authorities, or if there's a report of danger to life.
We've got the key to every door in there, right? So literally, we can let ourselves in.
Yeah.
If we feel like there's water leak or there's, a fire, obviously.
Yeah.
So it could be sleep, it could be passed out, so it could have happened. So we can just knock a few times, let ourselves in, settle the problem. Like again, they've got the door.
Caradon calls these welfare checks, but they say staff have to respect the privacy of the occupant. One evening, in the office, the staff tell our undercover reporter about a welfare check they say they were asked to do by a police officer.
Because she weren't in there, they made us take pictures, have a look round, see what we could see. Well, honestly, our fingerprints will be all over their rooms.
Yeah, but some...
Yeah, it'll be our prints. Yeah, I forgot about that.
During the visit, a diary was found and photographs were taken of it. Now, a staff member has the photos and they're discussing the personal and private details in the diary, which they say they shared with a police officer.
There's loads of pages, but we got the copper to read it out.
But we said to him, you've got to put on the accent.
Panorama approached the two members of staff involved to ask them about the breach of the residents' privacy. They didn't respond. Caradon say, as a result of the specific allegations made by Panorama, they've started disciplinary procedures and are investigating alleged security and privacy breaches. The resident they were talking about had been put in Temple Fields by an offender rehousing charity who have a contract with Caradon.
So when they come across with the new ones, will we know what they've come out after? You won't know anything?
No, because this was all agreed by people in head office who didn't think it through. And we said we still want a referral to decide whether we'll have them people in here. And as you can see...
The operations manager says she lobbied head office not to take people straight from prison.
This was my argument from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Do not do this, do not take probationers, do not do it, but 10 flats of money to them.
Yeah.
10 flats at $7.50 a pop.
Is that...
A month.
Essex police say they have no knowledge of any diary.
What bugs me the most is they offer no support to their tenants. They have not one clue what goes on in their buildings. They've jumped on the housing crisis.
Caradon say they're proud to provide a solution to help with the housing crisis, and they only make just over 2% profit from their permitted developments. But they're not the only ones profiting out of the temporary housing market. The amount of public money being spent on temporary accommodation has gone up 78% in the last 5 years. Shelter have been looking at who some of that money has gone to.
Polly, what are we looking at here?
So these are some of the highest figures in terms of the public money basically that is being paid to private organisations. So if you look here, we've got a figure of nearly 32 million. This is being paid to one private landlord for temporary accommodation. We've got another one here, well over 16 million. So this is the kind of money that private companies are making out of our housing emergency, out of people's misery, basically.
Back in Templefields, Nick is desperate to find a permanent and more suitable home for him and his wife. She's waiting for a kidney transplant.
We'd love to move out, and there's significant factors that stop us from leaving here. You can save up and you can do things, you can get work, but if you're not here because you're a hale and hearty person in the first place, something has brought you to this particular point.
Who's to blame?
I blame a lack of clarity as to who needs to do what. Without a Caradon, who would be providing this?
So Caradon are almost, they're your saviour?
Yeah, it's not a very palatable one, not a very nice one, but yes, there was no one else around. They're not doing us out of the kindness of their hearts. They saw a gap and they took it. Caradon's doing their job. They're making a shelter for people. The councillor's leasing it out and saying we've got available places to put people if we need to. Everyone on the face of it is doing their job, but no one's looking at the big picture. Every little part of the system is optimized, except the end-to-end experience isn't. The end-to-end experience is shit, and it traps people here.
Harlow Council have told Panorama that they no longer think properties like Templefields are suitable places to house families and children. And they plan to remove all their residents within the next 2 years.
Harlow Council have been sending their residents to Templefields House, knowing that Caradon properties have been deemed unsuitable. Why has that happened?
It takes time in order to deliver alternative temporary accommodation. It's appalling. In the 5th richest country in the world, we should be able to house people and meet decent standards of housing. These office block conversions are housing on the cheap.
In Harlow, the council have now given themselves the power to block a number of office to residential conversions. Other councils are doing the same.
What we really should be doing is investing in social housing, which actually is the only answer to the national housing emergency that we're in.
I just hope and wish that the people that are in those buildings, you know, it's the shortest stay possible for them and they can move out and carry on with their lives in a more positive way.
The government have announced they're launching a review into the quality of homes converted under permitted development rights. But they say they're committed to delivering the homes this country needs, and office conversions are playing an important part in making this a reality. So tens of thousands of people are likely to be living in converted buildings like this for years to come.